This is Chapter 2 of Unfortunate Citizen. How beautiful the sun was as it shone through the canopy of a fine pine forest, full of thick-trunked trees which slowly blanketed the silent floor with needles. It was perfect weather for the great picking competition that was to come in just a few hours, and as the princess of the city of Sicily looked about she was inspired. This was the day she had always looked forward to, and there was so much to look forward to. As was tradition, the night before, she had begun the public festivities by breaking down the clay oven which surrounded the carcass of an entire deer in the city square. This was drawn from the first dinner shared by the settlers of Europa when they landed so many years before. Those settlers had no ovens, no cabins, just tents and hand tools and a handful of rifles which had been carried from Earth. The planet was full of life when they landed, including massive herds of deer that had grown to number in the hundreds and thousands. As those deer were shot, they were gutted and cleaned, and the people would build ovens of clay balls around them. After this, a fire would be built about the clay, sealing in the deer and cooking it. Although most families ate deer roasted in wood and gas ovens now, the royal family would still prepare a stag in the original method. On this day, after the feast the night before, there was to be a competition of children in the picking of wild muscadine grapes which grew abundantly in the forests. The child with the most would be granted a crown made of the vines that brought forth the grapes, and would then be invited to follow the princess as she went on to visit the people of the city and pass out gifts of chocolate and coffee. These were wonderful luxuries that had to be grown in very carefully sealed greenhouses stationed in the city of Florence, and as such were usually only available to the richest citizens of the many cities and villages which covered the habitable region of Europa. It had yet to come, however, as the princess still stood atop an enormous boulder in the forest which she had chosen for the great picking. From its top she spotted the countless vines which dipped in rows close to and far from the forest floor. It would take a careful eye and speed to win, but that is what made it the perfect spot. "Here is perfect. The kids will love it," she said, looking down at the officials which followed her about. "Wonderful choice, ma'am. The people should be arriving in a few hours." "Oh, that's great. I can't wait. It is always so much fun." One of the ladies which had accompanied her smiled and said, "It is great to have them here and take part in our traditions as the people of Europa. I pray that they won't trip and fall, though." The princess laughed, remembering her own bumps and bruises from participating as a child. She brushed her hair a bit with her hands, tugging at the braid which fell on her back, and said, "That's what makes it fun. But I don't see how anyone could really get hurt. Anyways, how about we go and picnic by the clearing facing the city?" "Of course," said one of the two soldiers standing with the group. "We have the stuff back in the car, but how long are you going to stay up on that boulder? It is a little condescending, don't you think? Are we your slaves in Caesar's palace?" The guard spoke so openly and brazenly because he, as all the soldiers were good friends with the princess. Most people were all very close and friendly, as in a world specially terraformed to provide food and clean water without harmful microorganisms and plentiful wood and land. There was hardly a true conflict to be had for those who lived simply with the land. They understood the joke and laughed with the princess as she shambled down. Once down, the princess brushed her dress off. It was simple undyed fabric, the slight off-white color of hardly processed cotton. It was traditional clothing for the holiday, as it was the first sort of clothing made by the settlers in the years following the landing. Even on normal days, the princess did usually prefer to wear these sorts of fabrics. They were ventilated and not irritating, and neither did they express any sense of superiority to those in lesser social position. Looking to the soldier, the princess said, "My dear and loyal friend, I will gladly follow you to the car, so long as you carry the basket." Before the group could laugh, a voice called out, and they turned to see the Queen of Sicily coming in a small entourage of her own. Just her, and her gown of similar cotton to that of the princesses, and two soldiers in their uniforms. The uniform of the soldiers who served as the police force for the city of Sicily were traditional but very functional. Khaki pants and shirt with collar, short-sleeved and buttoned on the front. This, with a wide-brimmed deer leather hat and polished rifle, made every soldier look handsome, well put together, and very professional. These soldiers flanked the queen, the one who had called out. Once upon the group, she repeated what she had said. "Cecilia, are you enjoying yourself?" "Yes, mother, very much. Thanks for asking. How is your morning so far?" "Rather eventful. But that is something that would be brought up another day, after the holiday has passed. This patch of woods looks perfect for the contest today, and these rocks are a perfect starting point. What a delight. The princess just smiled and nodded, because despite the kindness of the queen's words in this moment, things were not always so friendly between them. This came from a long and drawn-out argument concerning things such as the people and ruling and the death of the queen's husband, the father of the princess. All of these things flashed through the mind of the princess as she stood and smiled, not dwelling on any one detail, but rather feeling the greater turmoil caused by it all. "Yes, rather delightful," said the princess after a long pause. The tension had suddenly cut away the joviality which had pervaded the group just a moment before, and everyone held their silence. A gust of wind came through the woods from the hot open fields to its east, between them and Sicily. It sent pine needles and leaves up into the air, blowing about the clothes of the people standing in awkward silence. The soldiers were especially uncomfortable, seeing that the tension which overcame the happy morning was something far beyond their realm of authority or privilege. With a sudden few words, the princess shared that she was to go for a walk into the woods and return at the time for the contest, foregoing the picnic. She said that she would eat some things that she found while she walked. The queen smiled wryly, understanding why her daughter was leaving so suddenly. The princess began to walk into the woods, slowly at first, but when she found that she was beyond the sight of the people and the entourages, she began to run. Barefoot and free from prying eyes, she ran quickly through and over the various obstacles she encountered. Eventually she came to a small hill and stopped, breathing heavily but invigorated and still full of energy. She always felt better after a big burst of physical activity like that. It helped to push all of her emotions into a sharp and sudden catharsis that, as she imagined the negativity leaving her body with the sweat and rapid breathing. The stress of trying to reconcile her differences with her mother over how to rule the people had become a more common argument as she grew through her late teens. Now 19 and drawing near to usurping her mother when she turned 60, as was detailed in the Constitution of Europa, she would have to make big decisions over how to proceed. However, now was not the moment, nor was today the day. Looking about, a small pool of tea-colored water revealed itself to the princess. These pools dotted the forests of Europa, where rainfall and groundwater came together to form cool oases of fresh water. The water was always safe to drink, given that it was not near to the sewage lagoons used to collect methane, and being that this one was far into the forest, the princess came and stooped to drink. It was cool and herbal tasting, mostly of pine, but of some other earthy tones which made it almost seem medicinal. Some claimed it was, but the princess merely regarded it as a delicious and distinctly European taste. Relaxed and somewhat rested, the princess looked about to see that she really was alone. The guard would never follow her into the woods when she went walking, understanding that she was very well versed in the sort of bushcraft that was necessary for anyone living on Europa. Confident in her solitude, she undressed, stepping out of the cotton garments and setting them to the side of the pool. As she slid into it, she felt once again at ease and happy. The frustration of her mother's insincerity to her around others melted away, and she merely felt the forest around her. Birds, of which there was only 3 species on the planet, sang away happily. A few squirrels dashed about on a branch far off, and the smells of the pine and earth were sweet and genuine. Her head rested on the bank of the small pool. The princess closed her eyes and knew that she wouldn't rather live anywhere else. She never wanted to be stuffed into a spaceship and head to some planet full of people and machines exploiting the ecosystem so carefully nurtured into existence for them to use by people so long ago. No, she would rather stay on Europa, in this or any forest, and be with the people who she shared her culture with. Sleep is a sneaky bliss which comes oftentimes unexpected, and this was the exact fashion how it overtook Cecilia as she rested. After a period of time, she knew not how long, the shake of a branch nearby woke her. Startled at her nakedness, she jumped from the pool and struggled to pull her dress over her head. She grew frustrated as it clung to her damp skin, but finally it covered her and she looked to see someone standing and watching. "You are a real creep, Sarah," Cecilia said. "Only to royalty," said the girl who had snuck upon the princess. Sarah, the close friend of Princess Cecilia, was the girl she had met while being out with her father to outreach to the people during the times of turmoil of 15 years before. They became fast friends, then only 4 years old, and to the objections of the queen became inseparable. A commoner in the court every day was something few objected to other than Cecilia's mother. The princess swept back her black hair and straightened out her dress. It clung awkwardly and did not fall gracefully as it once had. "Look what you did, Sarah. Now I'm going to look like a mess at the grape picking." "Maybe so, maybe not," Sarah said coyly, "if you hadn't already missed it." Startled, Cecilia looked up to the sun. It was close to, but not yet noon, the time for the competition. Looking down with a frown, she found that Sarah had a mischievous grin on her face. "That wasn't funny. You really freaked me out. But thank you for waking me up. I would probably have slept right through it if you weren't so lousy at sneaking around," said Cecilia. But that's where you're wrong. That branch that woke you up? A squirrel that I accidentally snuck up on." The story was hard to believe, but Cecilia decided to just let it go. Considering she had nothing with her beside the wet dress, she had nothing to collect, and made a motion to walk back. She said to Sarah, "If we leave now, we won't have to run, and maybe I'll dry out too. I can only hope. You know, you were getting a lot of looks last night when you cracked open the deer in town." Cecilia groaned as she stepped over a log. She had noticed, but tried not to think about it. It was getting to be obnoxious, but she tried not to let it bother her. But she did think about it, and it did bother her. "Please don't remind me. You don't think I have enough problems with my family breathing on my neck about finding a husband?" "Whoa, calm down," Sarah said. "I never even said anything remotely close to that. Sounds like you're kind of dumping your problems on me. Maybe you have some deep issues you need sorted out, so I can be the psychologist. Tell me, what does this look like?" She had bent over and picked up a stick and then shoved it in front of Cecilia's face. "A lot like a stick," she said. "Absolutely correct. So you weren't having hallucinations, which is a very good sign. But you were also in denial, so I think you have some kind of psychotic disorder, and you should be institutionalized immediately." Cecilia laughed and pushed her friend. Her humor was something that made each day easier, and Cecilia was ever grateful to have such a fun friend. It had not been long, and now the two were back to the area where Cecilia had abandoned the entourage. It was now filling with people, children running about, and adults standing to talk. Many of them carried packs made of leather and iron hardware. Simple and practical, they were common to the citizens of the more rural Sicily. Citizens would nearly always carry a few bottles of water, often made of glass or steel, as well as some food. This had much to do with the drier climate and long distances between parts of Sicily and other city-states. Not such an issue if the people had cars or horses, but because most walked or rode bicycles, they needed to be prepared for what could be several-hour trips. This trip had not been too far for the people, as this particular forest was on the western edge of the city's territory. 3 miles from the city itself, this stretch was the narrowest cushion of countryside on any of the 4 sides of the city, and was filled with farms, fields, and patches of forests. Not long to walk from the city for most, and to the children present it was well worth the effort. While the princess led the festivities through the midday to the evening, she failed to understand the greater significance of the day. It was a cruel bit of irony that the unity of culture and struggle for all citizens of the planet would soon be replaced by something far more dangerous. It's the end to Chapter 2 of Unfortunate Citizen.